Welcome to Divorce After 50, the podcast where we dive into the unique challenges and opportunities that come with divorce later in life. I'm your host, Shari Frasure, and today we have a very special guest, Pat Fenner, the author of Rebuilding Your Life After a Great Divorce and host of the Silver Women Bright Future podcast. Pat's work has helped so many navigate this difficult situation, and I'm thrilled to have her here to share her insights. Pat, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Let's start with your personal journey. What inspired you to write Rebuilding Your Life After a Great Divorce?
Well, it actually started as just my own musings, my own thoughts and stuff after I had gotten my great divorce, and the journey that I had started on in terms of, healing and just trying to figure out, navigating, figure out what's life going to look like now. I had been married for, I think it was 37 years, and I knew my ex-husband probably 2 or 3 years before that. So definitely like longer than half my life I've been married. I've been married more years than I wasn't.
We have a very similar path. It sounds very much like my experience. So you started the podcast basically from your own experience, but to help support women, through and give them some hope. I know that that's the reason I started my podcast. And, I found that many people assume that divorce is easier when you get older, but in reality, it comes with its own set of challenges. What are some of the biggest obstacles people face when divorcing after 50?
First of all, great divorce is usually it's referred to when, not only after 50, but usually after more than 10 years of marriage. So it's fair to assume that most of the marriages in a gray or silver divorce are long-term marriages. And it's really funny, when I was younger, I kind of had I had an attitude about that. I figured, boy, if somebody's been married that long, can't they just like grin and bear it? Oh,
right.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Until I got there, and I know that there's a lot of reasons, and I talk about some of them in the book too, about why it's actually becoming a growing demographic, great divorces, even as the general rate of divorce is kind of balanced, So the challenges that we face is, first of all, I think primarily emotional. Whether or not it's a bad marriage that you were in, or, except for abuse, if it just was an unhappy marriage or unfulfilling marriage or whatever, you still have a relationship that's being rendered, torn after so many years. It's kind of become like an old blanket with holes in it. It's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really hard to just kind of balance, like, what's my life going to look like now? You're really kind of put off by that. But then the other one that's big too, that I found in my experience, is the financial. A lot of women in our generation, this after a certain age, boomers primarily, right? The women have chosen or just worked out that they were going to stay home and raise the kids. Although a lot of women today have careers, kind of balance the two.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the case. It wasn't very often the case in our day, right? So all of a sudden we have to find an income. All of a sudden we are responsible for our financial future. All of a sudden we have to think about retirement and getting really behind the light bulb, getting a leg start on that. A lot of women don't necessarily have a favorable divorce settlement. I mean, that's been proven, the statistics are.
Right.
And I was like that as well. And so you have to figure out, like, there's so much to figure out at an age when you feel like you should be winding down. Things are kind of closing up. We're just getting ready to kick back and enjoy life. We're starting over. And those are all challenges that just kind of hit you all at once.
Yes. And that was very much my experience as well. The emotional toll, like you said, because of the memories that you have, and thinking also that you're going to grow old together, or you're going to have, life's going to be totally different than what it turns out to be once you get a divorce. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. And I found too that your social circles change. Your adult children sometimes react in unexpected ways. you just are left wondering what now. And unfortunately, people, even the children, take sides. They try to give you advice, even your children, your friends try to give you advice where they don't have experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I found that was a big struggle too.
Mm-hmm. I felt very fortunate in terms of just the timing of everything. Yeah, I definitely hear you about the kids, and it's been hard. It's been challenging for adult kids. I mean, this is,
Mhm.
people often say it's uh, more difficult for younger kids because, they don't understand what's going on and all those things. But for older, for adult children, think about it, all their life, what they knew to be family, all of a
Uh-huh.
sudden isn't.
Right.
And that's, that can be traumatic too, and a really challenging thing to work through.
Mhm.
Back to the timing, your point about the social circles and stuff, social relationships. When we got our divorce, we had already moved out of the town that we had raised our kids in. We'd lived in Southwest Georgia for like, I don't know, 30 years. And
Mhm.
my ex-husband got a job in Lexington, South Carolina. So we had moved there. It was everything new, starting all over again. And after 4 years, my youngest daughter was going to college. Both of my in-laws, who we were caring for, had passed. And so that's when we got our divorce. And when I moved back to Atlanta. Now, I moved to Atlanta, but we had been living in South Georgia. So I was starting over on a lot of levels anyway. And I think that really helped me. Like, I didn't know many people. Well, no,
Yeah.
I didn't have any friends who knew me from when I was married. No.
Mhm.
I keep up with some older old friends on Facebook, but, Instagram, whatever, on social media. But
Uh-huh.
nobody that I interact with, like on a day-to-day basis now, knew me when I was married. So that really kind of helped,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
would think that in some ways it would, but also I know that if you've not been out in the workforce, or if you're not a very social person, or you didn't have maybe a church that you were attending, that can be really hard. But
Mm.
being in a city that you have no connections, I would think that would be extremely difficult.
Well, I was fortunate to find really good counseling who
Mhm.
helped me work through a lot of issues. I have a church that loves me, and I love my church. They didn't really help much in terms of my get working through my divorce. Did help deepen my faith because I found my divorce really was a. On my faith.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful. But I didn't want to have I didn't want to have to keep explaining myself to friends. And
Mhm.
I really found the more I dug into counseling and dug into finding out like who I am, where I want to go, what are my gifts and skills and abilities, what are my dreams. The more I dug into that, the more I was able to heal and get on a solid footing and move forward. Another challenge actually that you talk about in terms of finances, like we had homeschooled our 5 kids. And so I hadn't been in the workforce for like 30 years.
Mhm.
And I mean, I remember when I first had divorced, I would have these nightmares of feeling like, of dreaming that I was going to be like a greeter in Walmart, which there's nothing wrong with that. They're very nice people, but I can't
You
imagine.
didn't have any skills, or didn't think you had any skills.
Exactly. And the skills I knew I had, it was a hard sell to business owners, right?
Mhm.
Because they feel like, well, you haven't been doing anything marketable.
Right.
So that was difficult. So I, figured, well, I guess I'm just going to have to start my own business. That's all, which I did.
Yes, it's a very successful one.
Thank you.
Your book focuses on rebuilding. And what would you think would be the first steps that a person should take after a great divorce to start healing?
Well, I'll tell you, and you've been through this, so I think you'll agree. I'm not being snarky or minimalistic here, but
Mhm.
the first step is to breathe. A- And
Mhm.
and I mean that I would get so stressed out that I would feel like I was having a heart attack. I'm fine. I've gotten, checked out and everything. I'm fine. But I didn't breathe deeply, which meant oxygen wasn't going to my brain, which meant
Mhm.
I could not, literally, I could not think straight.
Uh-huh.
And there are decisions. They'd always tell you, don't make any big decisions when you first, have a divorce. But there are some things you do have to figure out. Where are you going to live? How are you going to pay bills? Whatever, like pay for gas in your car, depending on what kind of settlement you get. I didn't get a great settlement.
Mm-hmm.
So those were things that I had to start making decisions. But to do that, you have to think clearly. So
Mm-hmm.
breathe. And then just, write things down, because sometimes everything kind of balloons in your head when it's just in your head.
Uh-huh.
Or I find, at least, my imagination makes things worse or bigger than they need to be. So, I literally had it in my journal, just wrote everything that I needed to do. Like, I needed to find a place to live. I needed to work on my business, because I had been doing it, but kind of, I don't know, kind of like as a side gig, because I had
Yeah.
been married.
I have this. Yeah, we have the same
Wow.
circumstances. I did the same thing. I had my real estate license for 10 years and, I dabbled in it, but I didn't do it as a business.
Right. Right.
Then all of a sudden I had to make a living.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's things, there that are involved, to
Mhm.
get to get a job, or find a broker, start a business,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But once I looked at them, I was able to say, okay, well, I don't have to do this one right now. This one can hold off a little bit. This one I need to get started on. This is a long-term one, so there'll be steps for that one. Like, you can start seeing how things are going to work out together. And that really does a lot to minimize your stress, or lessen your stress,
Mhm.
which helps you breathe, which helps you think, which helps you move forward. Like, it's a positive cycle.
I think once you embrace it and you stop worrying about what could have been, or, what happened in the past, it just makes it so much easier to move forward and to do the
Mhm.
things and make the right decisions. Speaking of decisions, like you said, you need to breathe first of all, and so you can start realizing what you need to do. But there's a experience of loss that's just like grieving a death, or at least it was for me, and I think a lot of people I talk to. That is the first thing that you have to kind of get
Mhm.
your mind around, that grieving is okay, and being, hurt, and all those emotions that you feel are okay.
Mhm.
They're all part of it. I think a lot of times we feel guilty about it.
Yeah. And the thing is, emotions in and of themselves, there's no value. There really isn't any, like, good emotion or bad emotion. We
Mhm.
attach value to it.
Mhm.
And when I was able to realize that, like, just sit and feel the emotion and allow myself to go through it and explain to myself why, like, talk to yourself, literally, why are you feeling this way?
Mhm.
What are you grieving? Helps you to move through it. And also to keep in mind that it may periodically come up again, and that's okay.
It certainly will for
Yeah.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
Just like a grieving, the loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
You're gonna have that creep back in too, for
Absolutely.
years. So it is, experiencing a loss.
Well, what helped me to accept that was framing it, asking myself, what's the difference between letting go, or losing something and letting it go? So when
Mhm.
I would start grieving, I'd say, what am I grieving? What loss am I grieving? And I realized it was the loss of something that wasn't even there. Like, it's not the relationship necessarily that I was grieving. It's what I was imagining would come in the future,
Yeah,
the
right.
growing all together. What I
The
was letting
expectation.
go, yeah, the expectation.
Yeah.
What I was letting go of, though, which was much healthier, was a situation, was a relationship where I wasn't being allowed to grow. That is to my benefit. So, I think if you can ask yourself those kind of questions, you can't do that right away, of course, because you're
Mhm.
just immersed in grief and confusion and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But after a while, to ask yourself, what's the difference? Let's look at these between losing something and letting go, and let's process this so that you can move forward.
And again, I go back to your circle of friends and family and your children all kind of having an expectation of you, and you're trying to, I guess, spare them. And sometimes, they just don't want to hear about it, and they'll kind of turn. So counseling definitely is helpful there. Grief counseling would be something that, you might want to look into. But, those are all things that someone going through a divorce are going to experience even after for years.
Yeah.
And I think that you just have to allow yourself to feel it, to have those feelings and be okay with it and not beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things, we touched on it a little bit, was the financial part of it, especially if you've not been involved in the business or in the, financial, you've just basically been the wife and mom and housekeeper. And sometimes we get things thrown at us that we are not prepared for. So the first thing that I would counsel anyone is to start, looking at your assets, because you're going to have to. You're going to have to know what you are going to be dividing and all that stuff. And if you understand your assets, what you owe, anything that has to be divided or paid off or taken care of, and you're going to need a team of experts to help you through that, because unfortunately, the first thing we do is go and hire the best attorney, the one that we think is going to be the toughest and going to get, it done for us. And they can only wear one hat, and that's to be your attorney. So I found that, a team of experts, financial, insurance, taxes, there's all kinds of things that you need to know about. And you need to know people that know what they're talking about and not take advice from just anyone.
Yeah.
That's one of the toughest things, I think. And fortunately, a lot of those things can be done without any huge cost to you. You can get some advice and then maybe, hire them later or hire them now, and that becomes part of your divorce settlement. But you definitely need to know what your actual, financial situation is, because you're going to have decisions you're going to have to make that you can't make without knowing that.
Yeah. When I wrote that book, I was writing from the perspective of already having gone through the divorce, and I didn't have all those things in place when I got a divorce. And actually, I did find a good financial advisor through a business networking group I'm in. And I had my meeting with him, and the first thing he asked me, or one of the first things he asked me, was, Pat, what do you want? He wasn't talking necessarily about finances. Where do you want to be in 5 years? What's your picture of retirement? Like, let's pretend money's not an issue, or not pretend. Assume money's not an issue. What do you want? And the thing is, all those years of being married, my ex-husband had kind of handled that, and I kind of just followed his lead. And I will never forget. And this is like what the first meeting with him, and he asked me these questions, and I started crying. I was like, I have no idea. I don't know what retirement looks like for me. Because without him, I don't know where I want to be in 5 years. I don't even, have a business that's paying for my bills right now. At the time when I met with him, I said, I didn't know all these things. So even before, I think sometimes feeling like, you have to have the financial advisor, you have to have the lawyer, you have to have all these things. You need to check in with yourself. And I'd say the first thing is to get counseling, before you have all those other things. Let the assets just settle and sit for a while and figure out what you want. And because your life is no longer going to look like you thought it was, or even that you weren't thinking about it. Now you do have to have a picture. And we're not necessarily in tune even with ourselves. And if I thought, when I first got that signed paperwork and it was a done deal and they were, everything was filed, just the idea of getting gas, like, oh my goodness, I have to figure out what gas station I'm going to use. Like, I know that sounds silly and trivial, but like, that's what it was like.
Yeah, I agree.
And all those other things would be like, put me over the edge, so there's a lot of personal work that has to happen, I think.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of ladies don't have that luxury to, spend that time, because it's thrust on them and they've got to react. And I hate that, but it is the case in a lot of situations. again, a good support system, like you said, a therapist, a coach. There are divorce coaches now.
Yeah.
I've got a certification for that too. I work as a counselor or coach, but it did help me with some of the techniques, I guess, of helping people. But another thing they can do is listen to podcasts like this. It's very helpful. There's a lot of them available that weren't available to me 12 years ago. So, and that was another reason that I wanted to create this podcast, is because there wasn't those resources. And even now it's hard to find the right one, or, to know which one would be the most beneficial. So those are some things that you can do, but shifting your mindset is the first thing to do.
Yes,
Is not going down that fear. And the only way you can do that is if you have somebody that's helping you to just think differently.
Right. And it also keeps you from getting stuck in that bitterness. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a lot, but there are a few podcasts, and I've been in one or two Facebook groups too, where the vibe is kind of like, let's bash our husbands,
Yes.
ex-husband bashing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
let me tell you, that might be tempting, because you want to feel vindicated, but it absolutely does no good. I mean, it doesn't help you move forward. It doesn't serve to be a good example for even your adult kids are still watching you,
Yes, they are.
and it doesn't, and it doesn't set a good example for them. It's just, and nobody wants to be around a bitter person. Like there's no
That's
positive
true.
to it,
Yeah. You just feel even more rejected. So don't put yourself in that
Yep.
situation.
Yeah.
So, in addition to your book, you have the podcast Silver Women Bright Future podcast.
Mhm.
It provides support and encouragement for women navigating their second act after a silver or gray divorce. What inspired you to do the podcast? Did you do the book first, or?
No, I actually did the podcast first, and I had a podcast a couple years ago for probably 2 years on home education, homeschooling.
Mhm.
We had a co-host with that, and we wrapped that up. And I was homeschooling, I guess, our youngest daughter, and I just wanted some company. We had moved into, out of town, so I was kind of short on friends that I could see every day, and just found this woman. She's another author, but also homeschooler, who lives in Canada, and started, podcasting that way. And it was a lot of fun. But then I just decided over the years, I have gotten so much from the podcasting community in general. I just find that for the most part, they're very generous people. A lot of people do podcasts and don't make any money at it. It's a passion project.
Yeah, I don't monetize mine.
Yeah, and they do it just because they have a mission that they really want to, or a message, and they really want to help other people with whatever, that their skill or their topic is. And I've benefited from that a lot over the years, and I'm trying to pay that forward. And I really feel I'm a Christian, and I really feel that God helped me through a lot through this divorce.
Yes, me as
And
well.
and so the podcast was really my way of paying it forward, not wanting to sit on that. And then the book came after that, and so they kind of work together now. But yeah,
Definitely the same topic, so.
yeah.
So we talked a little bit about this too, and a lot of women will find this through Facebook groups or just other women that have experienced it. So there's one of the places to start, because there are a lot of Facebook groups now for various different situations. And again, like you said, don't necessarily get on there just to have a place to go and bash. You may want to state your case at the beginning and then let it go. Because, you do need a little bit of an outlet. So there's nothing wrong with that, because you've got a lot of like-minded people, or people that have had the experience and that can encourage you, and they can also pray for you. So I don't discourage that necessarily, but don't make it, the only reason that you get in those groups.
Yeah.
There are classes. There's divorce classes. I know I went through one as a divorce support group, and it was helpful to some extent. I did meet a lot of people that I still am connected with today. And it was co-ed. There was men and women in there. So, I think that's another thing that you can do. Volunteer, just get out there, do something that, to serve other people, to take it off your mind off of things. But there are also meetup groups. There's events that are taking place. And I think that would be the one thing that I would encourage you most of all, because I know when I first became separated, I immediately met some friends and started line dancing and going, and doing a lot of social stuff. So I was never alone hardly. And I'm thankful for that because it really helped me get through the hardest part. And I think loneliness and isolation is probably the worst thing that you can do.
And I'd have to say too, a little bit of an indictment on the Christian community, but I think the church is, I don't remember pointing fingers, but they don't always help, because
I agree. Yeah, especially if you were a couple at that church, which I was.
Yes, yes. And nobody, I don't think, I mean, maybe there's somebody around here, but I don't think most people want to get divorced, even if you want the pain of a bad marriage to stop. You still don't want to that's not primarily what you want, right? And like I say, I mean, I said in the book, I said I struggled a lot because I am a Christian. I believe in marriage for life, and I am divorced.
Yes.
It's not an either or, it's not a but, it's a and I still do believe in marriage for life, and I take those vows seriously. But this is where I am, and I don't think the church needs to be beating up on us like we
No, and they also they don't know what to do with
Right.
you. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to think themselves, because a lot of times they don't know the situation and they may be thinking you were the problem. You were the one to blame, and not necessarily that either one of you were, because unfortunately it's two people that just couldn't make each other happy or whatever. But there is some judgment going on there that's not really necessarily fair, and you will probably feel that. But at the same time, there's also probably a lot of other women and men that are in your church that are going through or have been. So they would be helpful. And there are some groups, single groups at churches. And so, not necessarily that you shouldn't go there, but just put that in mind.
It's to your point about being isolated. You don't, you usually don't know that off the top.
Right.
Because like you said, they don't know what
I mean, you're a mess. I mean, you're crying, you look bad, you just can't eat, you can't sleep. So, at first it's rough. And, fortunately I had quite a few people that came and just lifted me up and just let me cry, and we're just there.
Yeah.
There are people out there that can love you that way. But letting that loneliness creep in is probably the hardest thing. And again, seeking therapy, counseling of some sort would definitely be helpful. So your podcast and mine, I think, cover a lot of practical and emotional aspects of post-divorce life. And, housing options is definitely one of those things that we didn't talk a lot about, that as a real estate agent, that's definitely something you've got to know, you're going to keep the house, you're going to sell it, and not just the real estate agent, but you need a financial, like a lender, a loan officer, mortgage person that can tell you what your options are. So there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of knowledge, and they're not attached to your relationship or in any way. So if you do have an attorney first, or you have a friend, just kind of ask them if they have anybody that they would recommend, because personal referrals is the best.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
But, there is purpose in life after the divorce, even at 50 or 60 or 70. And that's why we're doing these podcasts, and why I wanted to invite you to join me. Wanted to give you an opportunity to tell people how to get your book or subscribe to your podcast and how to connect with you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, I'll give you the link to put in the show notes, but my website's patfenner.me. The book is available on Amazon just recently. So anybody that wants to pick it up, I'm asking for reviews and 5 stars. You know how that works, to help get the message, that kind of thing. And then, of course, my podcast is Silver Women Bright Future, and I'll give you the link for that as well. But I would love if there's to your point earlier about the finances, if it was such a big thing to me and such a blow to my ego, because I like to consider myself a smart person, and finances were really challenging to me. So I decided once I got on my feet, I'm working through becoming a financial planner. And I'm hoping by the end of the year to have all my certification. And
Yeah.
my focus will be to help us, to help in through gray or silver divorces to be able to get back on their feet and to create a bright future for themselves.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that's a great thing to be offering. As we wrap up here, if you are facing divorce after 50, know that you're not alone. You have the strength, the resources, and the support to build a brighter future. Make sure you subscribe to Divorce After 50 and check out Pat's podcast, Silver Women, Bright Future, for even more encouragement. Until next time, take care and keep moving forward.